Robert Grillo is the director, of Free from Harm, which he founded in 2009 to advocate on behalf of farmed animals. As a marketing and communications professional for over 20 years, Robert worked on large food industry accounts where he acquired behind the scenes perspectives on food branding and marketing. And his book, Farm to Fable, The Fictions of Our Animal Consuming Culture, is one of the only books on the topic of the humane hoax. Robert is going to wrap up the conference with a call to action and help us to take action against the humane hoax. Please welcome Robert Grillo.
Hello. Thank you for having me in the conference, Hope. And can everyone hear me okay? I hope. Can someone chat or comment and let me know that I can be heard okay? I'm going to assume so. I'm not
You're
seeing
good.
chat.
Everybody can hear you.
Okay.
There's lots of all. We can hear you. You're good.
Oh, now I
Go
see.
for it.
I have the chat window. Okay. So I'm sharing my screen. So I'm going to go to PowerPoint and go full screen and hope that everybody can see this okay. All right. So my name is Robert Grillo. I'm the director of Free from Harm, as Hope says, and I just want to open with just a little bit of background on my work on Farm to Fable, which is a book and a presentation series. And I want to lead that into a kind of a discussion with you all about how we can turn our frustration over misinformation campaigns like humane washing, how we can turn that frustration into action, into actionable things to do for animals, because I think it really helps us get out of a rut. It's helped me immensely a couple of years ago when I decided, it's great to write about this stuff, but we need to do something as well. We really need to feel like we're accomplishing something. And so after every presentation that I'd give on Farm to Fable, people would come to me or ask at the end, it's great to have this information, but what can we do about it? So I just want to, for those that haven't heard about Farm to Fable, I just want to provide like a kind of a foundation for it so we can use this as a place to start. And so I define Farm to Fable as our culture's pervasive false narrative that other animals are here to serve us, that they are willing participants in whatever it is we'd like to do with them, and that we are kind of, in essence, the God over their fate. Like we are endowed with this responsibility to determine what their fate is going to be. We can't just, leave them alone. And examples of humane washing and the humane hoax, as this summit likes to call it, they're everywhere pretty much we go. So at every social touch point, we find examples of it. And, I don't have to tell most of you out there that how frustrating that is. We see it in the grocery store. We see it when we go online, websites like Fair Oaks Farms. We see it in the New York Times in feature stories like this one. We see it in restaurants, plastered all over the walls, in feel-good messaging. We see it in iconic films like Rocky. And we see it when we walk down the street on the sides of buildings. We see it in HBO films like Temple Grandin, and on the side of the road, plastered on the sides of trucks. And we teach it in the classroom. We teach Farm to Fable. And we see it in the museums and art galleries, and in the iconic art of all kinds of cultures around the world. And I think a place for me to start in a discussion about humane washing and humane hoax is consent, because I think consent provides the foundation for then talking about treatment. So in other words, if we believe that animals are consensual and that animals are willing participants in whatever it is that we'd like to do with them, then we've reduced the discussion down to how do we treat them? As long as we provide them with a certain modicum of respect, then the idea that use matters, use no longer matters, because we've already ruled that out, and we've already bought into this fiction that animals are consensual. So it's just a matter of how we treat them. So that's kind of my orientation to the humane hoax is understanding consent as kind of the foundation for that. So I want to kind of get into some ideas I have that have helped me combat the humane hoax, and tips for activism. I'm looking at some of the chat messages here. Where am I in the world? Oh no, that's not for me. I'm in Chicago, in case anyone is wondering. But so I've got a few videos that I want to show you. But before we get into those, throw out some ideas. So for me, it's important to focus on local issues. And when we're not sure exactly where to start, I think it's important for us to look at local issues. Start local, and sometimes things can go from local to national and international. But one important thing about local activism is that we need community. And I think in this world of virtual activism and social media, signing online petitions and doing all that stuff online is great, but it kind of rings hollow for a lot of us, and we need more than that. We need to go back to really face-to-face discussions and heart-to-heart conversations. And so we can have really meaningful discussions with people. We need to meet face-to-face. So that's why local is important. And when we have community, it builds our morale, it builds our confidence in a way that we can't get from a virtual world. It's not as real. Another big reason why local is important is because it's oftentimes our best chance at media coverage. We're more likely to get the attention of local media to get coverage on our issues than going directly to a national or international media outlet. And then sometimes, a local story you've seen a lot of times. Yeah, I see that too. Someone just chatted that I have an infinite shot of things. That wasn't purposely done, but let me see if I can fix that. Okay. Yeah, then I can't see chat. Better? Yeah. Thanks, Dylan. When I switched to full screen of myself, then I lost the chat. So then I can't see questions and comments. So I think I'm going to go back to this mode. Russian doll syndrome. I like that. Anyway, so the last reason about local, pick another website. Well, we're going to get to some videos soon. If I pick another website, then I can't see myself, and I'm not sure I'm even in the screen. All right. The last thing about local is that we have more power over local issues in our own community. And our city officials or our local officials are more likely to be responsive to what we're trying to do. So An example of using local grassroots activism is our Slaughter Free Chicago campaign, which I'll get into a little bit more later, because it really embodies a lot of the tips and points I'm bringing out about getting active. We have a very active campaign going on right now that I'm going to talk to you about. So the next thing is about alliances and who our allies are. This is like a huge topic. So I just want to touch on this because I think it's so important, and it evolves a lot too over time. For example, last year we had our first big animal rights march in Chicago, and we tried to put together a coalition of different groups that are active here and different individuals that are well connected and could help us promote the event. And so that's like the broadest, that is the broadest definition of allies, of alliances. We wanted to create a mass mobilization. So we wanted to make it very inclusive. So that's an example of one kind of way to build alliances. But then there's special projects, or like our Slaughter Free Chicago campaign. Who we bring into that is a little bit more specific. So the allies that we define for that would be like Chicago Animal Save and Anonymous for the Voiceless, and other groups that are interested in doing the investigative work and the public actions that we want to do. It's a little more specific. Whereas the march, we consider a lot of different kinds of people allies for that. Even people that weren't necessarily into animal rights, or they could be cat and dog lovers. In fact, we reached out to local dog and cat shelters to see if they could help us promote the event, because we thought it's a teachable moment for a lot of people that could come to an event like this and deepen their knowledge of animal rights and the issues. So we wanted to make it very inclusive. So defining our allies is a huge thing, and it varies per project, and it evolves all the time. Looking at some of these comments, I hesitate to talk directly to people because I don't always have a quick, clear response. Is there a way to learn what to say when? Is it learned with experience, or can I get specific guidance? And that was Wendy. Let's get to that. I have some thoughts on that. I don't think there's an easy answer to that, but I'll see if we can get to that in the section about communicating. Okay, so focusing on the local, defining who our allies are. This third thing is learning from others. And that's a big thing that I've been doing the last couple of years. Because I'm interested in a lot of other progressive causes, human rights and workers' rights and women's rights. I've been following and actively participating in these groups and getting to know people there and seeing where there's opportunities for alliances. What I found is there's a lot of closet AR vegan type people in these other groups that don't talk about it. But when they learn that you are, then they want to talk about it and they open up about it and they feel like it's becoming more acceptable to talk about it. But they seem very quiet about it in these other groups. So that's really interesting. When we reach out to other groups that are doing something parallel to animal rights, but not necessarily animal rights, we find there's a lot of people that are very sympathetic to what we're doing and are interested in getting on board. I also just want to point out that I think it's kind of bizarre in the animal rights world. For some reason, there are certain people out there, maybe this is just a social media kind of problem, but people tend to think that we're unique as animal rights or vegan activists, and that we can't somehow learn or borrow from other successful groups and actions and tactics. I don't know why they think we're separate, but we're not. There's nothing terribly unique about what we're doing except the victim group. The oppressors are pretty much the same. The tactics for speaking truth to power, all the things that I'm talking about here today, local grassroots activism, defining who our allies are, learning about the intersectional nature of what we're doing through other groups. All of these things are not unique to us. So let's not be afraid to utilize and learn from others that are outside our movement. So there's a few recent developments and examples that I would give you. I'm going to show some videos of one about the Sunrise Movement, which is a recent kind of, very grassroots, very spontaneous youth climate movement that has been making a lot of waves lately. And I'm really following them. I'm really interested in what they're doing and how they're doing it. And and that inspires me. So I guess what I'm saying is find other groups out there like that inspire you too, and maybe the Sunrise Movement is one of them, and learn from what they're doing. And they can't be too young or too old to learn from. Like, I'm in my 50s, and some of these kids are in their teens, they're 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. But they're doing wonderful activism that we could learn a lot from. And so age is not a factor in terms of what we can learn. Okay, so I'm gonna play this video, or parts of it, just to give you a flavor. Maybe some of you have already seen it too.
I'm here in the Longworth House office building with Sunrise Movement. Over 1,000 protesters are here, over 100 risking arrest, to demand that Democrats, who are now going to be taking control of the House, take up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's proposal of a Green New Deal Select Committee. And now the action's about to take place.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Olivia. I'm 19 years old. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I'm here with hundreds of young people because our livelihoods, our futures, and our very existence are being threatened by Democratic leaders who claim to represent us. We are here demanding Representative Steny Hoyer support a select committee for a Green New Deal and prove to us that he takes the climate crisis as seriously as we do.
I call upon all politicians to provide opportunities for people marginalized for far too long, to mitigate the effects of climate change on poverty and health, and most importantly, to provide a chance for a livable future for me, my community, and the 43 million other Americans under the age of 25. We are the future. Please allow us to live up to our potential.
The IMF estimates that around the world, it's something like $10 million spent a minute subsidizing oil and gas. An incredible amount of money is spent subsidizing oil and gas. And we also know that last year, $1.5 trillion was given in tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans. The money is there. It's just a matter of whether these politicians are willing to do what needs to be done.
So guys, a lot of what people are protesting here are the fact that Democrats continue to take fossil fuel money. The DNC reversed its pledge to not take any fossil fuel money now that Tom Perez is the head of the DNC. And Steny Hoyer himself, in his career, has taken over $2 million from energy companies. So that's part of why they're targeting him specifically.
This is not a local issue. This is not a community issue. This is not an American issue. This is a global issue. But us as Americans, are leaders of the free world, and we are one of the leading countries to release greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
That's right.
Right? It is our duty to protect our free world from destruction, even from within ourselves. Don't deny what you see. Don't deny the data, the facts, the proof. Climate change is real, and in less than 10 years, the harmful effects on our planet will be irreversible.
All right. One other quick shot. Oh God, please don't. Even
Democrats have become the party of open borders, crime, and abolishing our brave men and women of ICE.
All right. So this just shows you footage you may have seen where over
So we're here to say to our politicians,
actually descended upon the Capitol building, Nancy Pelosi's office, and some were arrested for civil disobedience for it was peaceful, of course, but some were arrested because they didn't leave when the police asked them.
we need you. We need you to back a Green New Deal.
We are now fighting for existence.
Well, you can comply, we'll be going into arrest. Your first warning. Ladies and gentlemen, you are no and this is a second warning. To be arrested.
All right, I'm back. So the reason why I chose this example was because I think it's an incredibly powerful example of a very, like I said, a very spontaneous, but very passionate youth movement that's, that's something we could learn about. I mean, I love the fact that they're targeting Nancy Pelosi's office, the very seat of power, the most powerful person in the House of Representatives that is about to announce a climate panel, and they ended up not creating the Green New Deal as the climate panel. They did something alternative to that, which is kind of a light version. It doesn't have much legislative power, but in any case, these kids, these young people, and what they've done is phenomenal, because they got already 50 Congress people to sign on to the Green New Deal, to support it on some level, or to become an official member of the Green New Deal caucus. So it's a great strategy. It's something that we will use in Slaughter-Free Chicago when we go to our city officials and demand that they do their job, demand that they investigate and regulate. And ultimately, we believe that they will find, if they do so, that they will find that these businesses, these remaining slaughterhouses in Chicago, are so rife with violations that the system is so broken for regulating them that they have no business giving them slaughterhouse licenses. And so that's our strategy. Our strategy is similar to the Green New Deal strategy in targeting our elected officials and our city officials in general to meet the demands we're asking for. So I also want to show you quickly, well, there's one other video actually, there's two. There's one other Sunrise Movement video, which is interesting, I think, because they actually have a conversation with the congressperson. So let's take a quick look at this.
All these, process bureaucratic things. It delays what we're trying to do. We haven't had a chance since the Republicans are the majority to move on a climate agenda. Now we want to do that. And I don't know how much I can stress to you, and I think that's what Adam was trying to get. I mean, I don't know that there's anything that you're saying that I disagree with in terms of the agenda.
So will you take the no fossil fuel money pledge?
You know what? We can't wait to be sworn in and address this. I come from a part of the country, Silicon Valley, where most of the innovation has come from in the alternative energy portfolio. We couldn't even get them to agree to have.
That's a little low in volume, so I'm not going to play that very much of that because I'm concerned you guys might not be able to hear it. But what they're basically asking these Congress people to do is take their no fossil fuel funding pledge. If you really believe, in the Green New Deal, and you really believe that climate change is a crisis that needs to be dealt with seriously, then you should not be taking fossil fuel funding. By the same token, we could ask our elected officials that if you really believe that in all the terrors of terrible, circumstances from animal agriculture, all the how they're putting public health at risk, how they're destroying the environment, how cruel and how awful it is in so many ways, then stop using our tax dollars to fund those industries. I mean, we can make similar demands. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. The other video was too loud. Sorry about that, you guys. I'm like really, it's really hard to get like the audio situation to know like whether something's loud or not. All right, I'm just trying to read some of your chat comments on getting some of this in. Looks like some people are asking other questions, not at me, but at other people chatting. Somebody asked if I could explain the Green New Deal. Green New Deal is, of course, the climate change a youth movement, I guess you'd call it. So check it out. Just go on to YouTube, or if you want to learn more, there's tons of great stuff out there on it. So I want to move on now because a lot of other subjects. All right, so that's about learning from others, and there's some other videos I'd like to show you, but we're already kind of 30 minutes into this. So there's a group out of New York that's doing something similar to what we're doing in Chicago, but not exactly the same. But so they are trying to end the ritual slaughter of chickens on New York City streets in the form of ritual slaughter. And so there's been a legal battle there. It's similar because we're trying to end slaughter, period, in Chicago. We're trying to revoke the licenses of the last remaining slaughterhouses. And I think our tactics will be similar. One tactic they took was to go after the health commissioner, Mary Bassett, and protest her public meetings because they couldn't get her to really, she gave them lip service and she told them that she would do something about this problem, but she didn't. So after they tried to negotiate with her diplomatically, they ended up disrupting some of her public meetings and shutting them down. And eventually she resigned as health commissioner of New York. So they may have had something to do with that, but they've definitely gotten the issue out on the table in a very powerful way, I think. So Stacy had a question. Robert, is the main action to get in front of cameras and speak our truth? The Sunrise Movement appears prominently in your presentation. Do you recommend organizing under a brand like that? Me Too and Black Lives Matter have demanded and garnered attention. How do you recommend we mobilize in that vein? Do we direct our action in politicians specifically? Yes. I really like all of the examples that Stacy gave. And I'm sorry, the chat keeps moving, so I can't go back to that comment right now. But yeah, so what I'm talking about here are ways that we can get that message out, hopefully, that are useful. So, you know, building alliances, focusing on local issues, learning from other groups. And the next one, which I think is really important, and that is focusing more on institutional change rather than individuals in our lives. So I can't tell you how often this happens, but almost after every public thing I do, which actually isn't that many, but it never fails. There's people that always ask, you know, what's a good way to talk to your family and friends? And, you know, I've gotten to the point where I don't talk to my family and friends about it anymore. I mean, I've been an activist for, you know, I consider being an activist for 10 years now. And I think that by doing my work and making it very public, making my persona very public, my family and friends know about it. They know what I'm doing, and I'm setting an example of who I am and what I hope the world could be potentially and what will be one day. So I don't work on my family and friends. I attempt to work on an institutional level. I attempt to influence our institutions of you know, that have a lot of power in changing things for the better. Like, you know, certain government agencies, certain elected officials, corporations, highly connected, influential people in the media, or community groups. That goes back to what I was talking about why it's important to build alliances, because we can win some of these people over, and then they can also become advocates and spokespeople for this cause as well. Okay, I'm going to go back to chat here for a minute. How do you work together with non-vegans on pro-animal issues you both agree on without falling into a trap of single-issue campaigns? That's a very interesting question. It's an incredibly complex thing, I think. It's incredibly easy and incredibly complex at the same time to navigate through these messy situations. For example, I know a great guy that heads up a local chapter of a progressive group. They're really active. They have great actions. I've met vegans inside of their group, members that are vegans, and yet, and he wanted to give me a voice on their podcast, and he gave me an opportunity to do a speak out at one of their big marches, and so he's definitely not there and not pro-animal, doesn't think there's anything wrong with eating animals, and yet he's very anti-factory farming. How many times have you heard that narrative, right? All these people that think it's actually possible and acceptable to eat animals that don't realize that you can't have that without having factory farming. So unfortunately, there's no clear way to define, but that's where we have to think about who our allies are. I consider this guy an ally on a certain level. He's been very respectful and he's been giving me a voice in an audience, in a venue that I would not otherwise have a voice in. So I appreciate and respect him for doing that, even though he's not there yet. And so each relationship then becomes unique, and how to negotiate that becomes something you have to use your own kind of intuition with. I know that's not a very good answer, but anyway, wow, it's 20 to 4, so I have a very limited amount of time left. So I'm going to get back to a few last points here. So I just talked about favoring institutional change, getting over our fixation on helping and trying to influence our friends and family when maybe they're just not the best. They're not going to get us very far. Focusing instead on community groups, on corporations that can really foster change, on government officials that are sympathetic to our cause. Also on the media, focusing on the media and social media channels where we have a large, active, and targeted audience. And just a word on media too that I think is important is we tend to think of, the major corporate media outlets as the most important ones to reach, or those are the ones we're striving for. But I'll tell you, what I've seen in the last year or two is astounding. I think we've all seen it, is that the independent outlets are getting more larger audiences on YouTube and other means than CNN and MSNBC and Fox and these others are getting. So, maybe we should get over our, concern about getting mass media, major media outlets to cover us, because some of these, like the Young Turks and the Intercept, Democracy Now, Vox, these outlets have huge huge audiences that we can tap into, and they're much more receptive to animal rights. Oh boy, I got a long comment here. Would you consider FEP's action? Single issue, yeah. So I don't want to get too into single issue campaigns, because that's not really about, I don't know. I mean, and it's an important issue. It just seems like something that could be discussed like for hours. But if a single issue campaign like Slaughter Free Chicago, well, I don't even know, would that be considered a single issue campaign? It's a single issue, but it's universal in the sense that we're trying to end slaughter in a geographic area, but not just the slaughter of chickens or turkeys, but all slaughter, because of the fact that we think we want a symbolic victory. We want to end slaughter in a city that once promoted itself as the slaughter capital of the world. So whether or not you consider that a single issue, I guess, is up for debate. Some will say yes, some maybe say no. But I think generally speaking, if a single issue makes a broader case and has a broader message platform for why speciesism as a general matter and animal exploitation as a general matter is immoral, is wrong, especially in the day and age we live in, when we can move beyond it, then we're not just simply, I would argue, we're not just simply advocating on a single issue level. So I guess that's my thinking on that. So let's see, a few minutes left, and then we'll start taking some questions. I didn't get through even half of what of what I have here.
Hey, Robert.
Yeah.
Can I jump in? There were a couple other questions that kind of went by, and I think you missed, that I think might be really better ones to kind of bring us back. So, if you have further thoughts, let me know. But are you open to a couple questions that were in the chat before?
Yeah, they fly by so fast. I just couldn't keep up with
that's
it.
okay. That's okay. So one was an interesting one about the Vegan Justice League. Are you familiar with them? I guess
Yeah.
they're a lobbyist group that they're collecting, you donate, and they're hiring lobbyists to speak to politicians. What do you think about that?
It's fantastic. I think that's where we should be going. Is unfortunately, there's some legal issues with nonprofits like Free from Harm getting too actively involved in what the IRS considers lobbying, quote unquote. So asking people to, launching a campaign and urging people to contact their congresspeople to shape legislation and to influence them is not something we can do a lot of. As an individual activist, I can, and as an individual, I can. And I would, we don't have to become a formal nonprofit to become a grassroots activist group. We don't have to have a formal nonprofit status. We can just be a group of activists. So if we're doing that, then we can do that unlimited. We can do as much lobbying and activism and calling our public officials and all that, and doing rallies and events to influence them, like Green New Deal is doing. That's what Green New Deal is doing. They're doing it specifically for the climate. And the one you mentioned, Hope, tell me again, is it social?
Vegan Justice League?
Vegan Justice League. It's a great and logical extension of that same idea that Green New Deal is using. So I'm really very for it. The only thing that I will do more of is local work, because I really believe that if I keep this local movement going, that it could reverberate out into other towns and cities. If slaughter can end in Chicago, for example, in the city that once promoted itself as the slaughter capital of the world, people may be inspired in other towns and cities to do it for themselves. And we can help them by providing a template for how we did it here. How we rallied public support, how we influenced our city officials to get them on our side. So local to national is kind of what I'm thinking.
Great. Yeah, awesome. And there was another one about people, that like artists can do art. You don't necessarily have to. And I think I'll get broader than that. And, we often, so we're hearing all this, and there's some people that are intimidated to possibly do actions like that are going into the streets or into, the Congress or something like that. It's maybe that kind of confrontational activism isn't what they're comfortable with. And so I wonder about how there's, I would say people, just whatever their personal talents are, people don't realize that we need everything. So maybe you're an accountant and, you don't realize that maybe the group that is going into, the Congress or whatever it is that they're doing, they need some help with accounting or the books with, there's so many ways that we can help in other ways. And I just don't want to discourage anyone if they don't feel that this is the kind of activism they can do. You know what I mean? Can you speak to that maybe?
Yeah, sure. Like what I'm showing you are examples of like actions and people being kind of in the public eye. And of course, like you said, that's not something that everyone's comfortable with. But let me just tell you how many opportunities, like just with Slaughter Free Chicago alone, how many opportunities there are to be like doing ninja things behind the scenes. We have all these ninjas like that are out there doing investigations at slaughterhouses to try to catch them committing violations so we can gather more evidence for our case. We have people helping us try to find meeting spaces, trying to get our flyers out there. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes. There's plenty of opportunities for people to do stuff where they're not necessarily in the public eye. At the same time, I would encourage even those that are shy to just show up for an action. You don't have to do chanting. You don't have to speak out. You don't have to do anything, but just by showing up and just, being there, we really need the numbers, like we need to show the public that more and more people care about this cause. And unfortunately, it's kind of a shallow thing, but the media and the public are more impressed by numbers, it seems, numbers of people showing up for things than anything else. So it requires a little bit of getting out of your comfort zone. And I know it's not easy, but try it once or twice and see how it works. And but otherwise, if you decide not to, there's plenty of other behind the scenes ninja, we call them ninja activism. You can do it behind the scenes.
Okay, all right. So let's see. More questions for Robert. So people are there was a question back before. It just keeps going. It's hard to grasp onto something. Let me go back and see if I can find that one. So Stacy asks about not just finding allies, but possibly open minds who might be allies in the future. Allies tend to have, oh, I just lost it again. Wish you could like grab it.
Yeah.
I should maybe cut and paste stuff. But I think she was basically talking about, again, working together with other groups.
How do we know if someone's, it's a complex issue who we decide to ally with. But I tend to lean on the side of inclusivity, because how do we know, or how can we possibly know if someone is going to be open or influenced by us if we don't give it a chance? We have to give it a chance on some level. And we may not let that person into our key organizing committee, but we want to reach out to the public with our message, and anyone who shows any level of interest, we want to engage. So,
okay, the chat just went a little cray-cray. Anyway, let's see. Trying again. Oh, okay. So, well, she's posting it again, but you did just kind of talk to it. How do we find and approach people who will be in the periphery of the institutions we want to change?
Yeah.
Let's see.
I think it's like networking, like anything else when we network. And some of us are good at networking and finding the right people, the people that are really influential. So again, I guess that goes back to the point about what are you good at and what can you lend? Like, you're an accountant, or you've got experience with, nonprofit management, or whatever the case is, like, lend what you're good at. Some people will be really good at networking and targeting the people that are very influential that we want to try to influence. So not everybody has to be good at that, but we all bring something to it.
So here's another question. Suggestions for countering the humane myth at a more grassroots level for folks who don't live in cities. So folks that are more rural.
That's a good question, because that's challenging, because you have, you're trying to reach, what is your motive for that? I would say if I was in a rural area doing what I do, I would be focusing on local media and hoping that maybe some of those interesting local media stories would be picked up by national media, because they found it interesting. For example, like Rowdy Girl Sanctuary. They had a pretty good success with the media because it was such a novel story about the small town in Texas, a woman who married a cattle rancher and became a vegan activist, and her husband, I believe, also went vegan. So that's a really novel story in a rural area that blew up, like, internationally. They got tons of media coverage. I guess I try to work that angle with the media, in that case.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. Any other questions out there? Let's see. Vegans need to share one another's work online and off. What public responses have you gotten from your book, Robert?
Oh boy. Well, lots of good responses from those who have read it, or I've gotten a lot of good feedback on the title too. Like people seem to like the title.
It's a great title. Great title.
Oh, thank you. It seems to kind of lure people in, or the irony of it, I guess, kind of lures people in anyway. But it's been pretty positive. It's been 2 years now since it's been out, so the effort to promote the book has kind of passed me. Although now I'm starting to think about an updated edition, like updating the book, maybe releasing a new edition at some point. Thanks for asking.
So you are doing an updated edition?
I hope to at some point. It's kind of in the back of my mind.
Nice.
I'm really busy with activism right now, though, so I don't know if I want to go back to book writing at this point.
Of course. Awesome. All
But
right.
I do a lot of juggling.
Let's see. What advice do you have about regarding getting media coverage? One doesn't want to be clickbait, but one wants to attract a credible microphone.
So that's the media is elusive. It's very frustrating to get media attention. I think that goes back to, I think we have to take a couple of steps back from whether, the question of how to get media attention and what's the best way to get it. The step back is to have a really powerful narrative. So we have to, I think, form a narrative about ourselves as an activist or the group we're affiliated with. One thing you'll notice about these successful groups like Green New Deal, and I would argue that Slaughter Free Chicago has a compelling story too. It's a movement to end slaughter in the city that used to promote itself and made its fortunes off of the backs of animals. So before we can get the attention of the media, we have to have a compelling narrative that they want to cover. And that's really hard to, sometimes it's really easy because it's just a great story on its face. But other times we really have to give it a lot of thought and crafting to figure out what that narrative is and how we can pitch it to the media. Free From Harm works with a media relations person. She's a professional. We decided to go that route, and it's been a year. And we're just now starting to see some results from laying the groundwork. But it's taken a year to get the media's attention. I'm hoping things are going to be easier when it comes to Slaughter Free Chicago, but I don't know, and none of us know. But start by defining what your story is and make it a compelling story that people want to know about.
And I think stories of animals too. It's amazing how, these stories where an animal somehow escapes from a slaughter situation or a transport truck. These can go so viral in a local area and draw so much attention. And so things like that, honing in on things like that, stories about animals, and drawing more attention to them.
On the subject of the Humane Hoax, the other kind of story that has been incredibly successful for us is, for Free From Harm, is the former animal farmer that has now transitioned to an animal-friendly business. So we have a series of about 22 profiles right now, and we're building all the time. But we've found that these, lots of other media outlets have picked these up, and they're really interested in the idea of, if they do it, really means a lot to people. That means they went 360 degrees from one mindset to another. And those are really, those are powerful stories too, as well as the rescue and the animals that escape slaughter.
Yeah, and those can be found on Free From Harm's website.
Yeah, humane-farmer. So freefromharm.org/humane-farmer.
Powerful. Yeah, and Wendy asked, where can local people hook up with local organizations, animal rights groups, and vegan groups that are doing this activism? And someone said, meetup groups, local universities, Facebook. But I don't know if you want to add to that.
I use Facebook almost exclusively. I've met so many people locally that want to do activism, animal rights activism, that I didn't know. Most of the people that are in our closed Slaughter Free Chicago group are people that I met at either events or on Facebook by looking at who came or who RSVP'd for certain kinds of events, and meeting all these local people that way, friending them, then inviting them to our group. And so Facebook has been a great resource for that. And by the way, when it comes to Facebook and social media, we limit our discussion to tactical issues only. Where are we going to meet? How are we going to meet? What time? We do not talk about substantive issues. We make sure that that's done in person. And I think with a local group, that's very important that we meet and we discuss things that are important in person. Anyway.
Okay, and on that point, I'm going to ask you to close if you could do this, hit stop sharing for me.
Yeah.
We're at time, but since you're the last speaker, thank you. Since you're the last speaker, we can let you go just a little bit longer, and I'd love it if you'd maybe wrap up with some specifics about Slaughter Free Chicago. Is that what it's called? And what you're specifically doing and the tactics that you're using, and just kind of in a nutshell, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, thanks. I'd be happy to talk about it. So we look at this as a two-part campaign. The first part is the legal team. So the way this all got started was we met some really amazing animal rights lawyers. There's 5 on our team right now. And they got really passionate about this idea that we could revoke the licenses of slaughterhouses because they're pattern of violations, and because the system is broken, because the inspectors and city officials do not do their job. So it's a broken system just ripe for exposing. So we have this legal aspect to it. And then from that, we need evidence to build our case. So we have a group of people that that are doing investigative work, documenting through images and video violations of slaughterhouses. And Chicago Animal Save is a group that has been doing this for 2 years now. So they have 2 years worth of evidence of repeated violations. So then we're also, in tandem with that, getting into making the connections with the people that we want to target. So certain city officials, we've asked for meetings to talk to them about the issue. We haven't gotten in yet, but we will attempt to reach a diplomatic solution with them if they will meet and discuss this with us. But if they don't act, then we will take more assertive measures to get their attention, and like the Green New Deal is doing. And we will make our presence known. We will try to get media attention to pressure them even further, and we will show up where they work, and we will ask them for meetings, and we will protest them with public meetings if we have to. But we feel very strongly that we can get the public support we need, because a lot of people who eat animal products, they don't really know, like we've been talking about this through all the speakers have talked about this to a certain extent, but they just have this abstract idea of where the products come from. But when they realize that in their own backyards, there's it's dark age stuff. I mean, the way these animals come in on trucks and the conditions they come in on, it's like the dark ages. It's awful. And I think when we expose this more and more, we'll get the support we need. And then we'll use the tactics that groups like the Green New Deal are using to ask our city officials to do the right thing. So that's the big overarching plan.
Okay, wonderful. So powerful. Thank you for that work, Robert.